Okay, folks, this is Sam here, and I don't usually do interviews on my channel. I'm probably going to be doing a few more, but I wanted to do an interview and have a conversation with my friend, the Leo King, David Palmer. It's funny because I don't call you Leo King, I call you David, but he is the Leo King. He's a well-known Western astrologer here on YouTube. He's been around a long time doing all kinds of stuff, and I wanted to talk about the upcoming year, 2019, with David. He's got a lot of really excellent stuff to share, and I wanted to just let people know one of the things that I've really gotten from David's work. David, I'll just tell you, as I've already told you, privately, is that even though, David does a lot of stuff that's, very accessible to like mainstream and whatnot, he's also a really excellent researcher. He's going to share some charts of like what are called recurrence transits, when things repeat over like historical, throughout history. He's going to be sharing charts that refer to those kinds of things, and he's actually a very good researcher, and people should really check out his channel and subscribe to it. And without further ado, David, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sam. Last time we talked on camera together was at UAC this year, 2018.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was great. We got into all kinds of zodiacs and all kinds of stuff like that. And, one of the things, what was it that we were talking about? Oh, we were talking about research when we were bantering about doing this. And you said, yeah, we should talk about that as well. And it really relates to one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on, because I know a lot of people do interviews and they just want to kind of interview the other person, which is cool. But I actually like to do work. I like to research and bring people on. And that, the reason I wanted to have you on here, and that was not to interview you, was to have you be able to show people the way you work with your in-depth case studies. You're an excellent researcher. And I've actually gotten a lot out of seeing the way you break things down and show why you're saying what you're saying. So, what are your feelings on that? Like, not just with YouTube astrologers, but in general, like the level of scholarship and the necessity for astrologers to actually do research and like show charts and all that stuff. What are your feelings about that?
Well, my feelings are, number one, that's how astrology works. I think that you have to have the case study to understand what are the repeating patterns here. Because even if it's just one pattern, you want to go back and see the pattern before that. Because if you're not able to start researching and seeing what's happening, you're basically just crap shooting everything. There is no foundation to what you're getting your information from. So I think research is so important, because it is the core understanding of, well, this has been happening and this has been happening. I mean, let's just take eclipses, for example. We know, just keep studying the major events in life, geopolitically or just in mundane astrology, eclipse times always are going to bring major transformation and change in the world. And so just like if you do case studies on looking at eclipses in certain areas of the zodiac, you're going to always be just flabbergasted about what happened. And without doing that work and doing the history, because I feel that astrologers really are also historians, because
yeah, they should be. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that. Yeah, I mean, otherwise it's just endless theory. This is the thing that I wind up seeing. It's like, it's wonderful to have all these theories. This theory about this theory about that. Oh, and there's this and there's that. And again, it's interesting to hear the theory, but the theory really becomes, a technique and a methodology when it's connected to a practice, and you see the theory in action. So case studies and showing the charts that make the theory come to life. And this is what I like about your work.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's why I love your work. And especially, you're such a big teacher to people. You teach so many thousands of students. And it's really, I think, a very important job, because there's so much astrology out there that's not astrology to me anymore. It's just kind of horoscope based, but more about the basic, you're going to make money this month, or you're going to have a great career, but it's so generalized and there's not a lot of specifics. And
it's that, or it's just the talking head. The thing that I notice is just everybody's theories, like especially even forecasts. And we all do it. I mean, there are times I don't always have a chart next to me. Sometimes I just say, okay, well, you know, like if it's a, you know, Saturn is going through Sagittarius, so I don't need to have a chart to show that, because it is just kind of two things and you can kind of theorize. But particularly when people start getting into things that are technical, like some technique or, you know, showing yogas or showing how something works, and then it's just endless theory. There's no chart that you're showing, or you're not showing it in someone's chart or whatever. This is why I'm glad to have you on here, because you're not just going to be saying, oh, 2019 is blah, blah. You're going to actually show charts. You also have some historical frameworks, that you're also going to be referring to. And that's what makes people learn.
Yeah, it's true.
And then you break it down. You break down like exact degrees or whatever it is, and you have the chart there, because we read charts. We don't just theorize, right?
Yeah, it's true. And going back to kind of this other astrology out there,
yeah,
I feel astrology is about, you know, karma. It's about spirituality. It's about consciousness. So there's a split I feel going on right now. There's this kind of more, I guess you could say, not connected to soul astrology, and then soul astrology. And the soul astrology is very deep and very, you know, it has roots. It uses traditional aspects, but you can, of course, move into some new energy with it, but it still always has a base. And then there's this other astrology that's kind of baseless and kind of just not very spiritual and just kind of throwing pasta on the wall and trying to get hits and clicks and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm noticing. I don't know about you, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, the main thing that the main principle that I find that I found surprising about you, actually, because, you know, you have a very, you know, a very unique presentation that one might think, oh, this guy's just kind of celebrity or this thing. But when people look into what you're doing, you're a very good researcher. This is why I wanted to bring you on the channel as well. People might think it's an odd pairing because our presentations are different. I kind of turn on the camera and I'm like, haven't even shaven, and you know, and you have a very, and I really like it. I mean, you know, we were talking off camera about, I have the vision one day I'm going to have a green screen and all that stuff. And, you know, but you've put a lot of time and effort and energy, and you deserve to be commended for bringing it, you know, to have a nice aesthetic and a look and a sort of branding and all of that. And sometimes people might think that it's not serious work that you're doing. And I want people to know that watch my videos, they need to check out what you're doing. And particularly what I've noticed is your case studies and research and the more involved videos that you do. We all do it, because I also do quick updates, and they're less detailed. It'll be just like, okay, well, this week we have this kind of thing going on. But then you have very deep stuff that you're going to share with us. You know, you're going to share some of that work with us here today, and I wanted people to know that you're a serious researcher, and I appreciate that about your work.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
So
well, yeah, I think we should talk about 2019 a little bit here.
Yeah.
Because I feel that, especially in Western, you know, we deal with outer planets, and there's some major outer planet stuff going on. And when I look at 2019, I go, this is an overwhelming the amount of time it would take for these transits to happen. I mean, we're talking about an 800-year cycle coming up at the end of 2019 that's building all through the year. So as an astrologer, when you see something that takes that long, because I mean, in the cycles of astrology, you know, 30-year ones are big, and especially when you add outer planets, you go, oh, okay, Pluto's a 248-year one. But then when you get into cycles that take 800 years, you go, whoa, this is not normal, and this is extreme. And that's, as an astrologer, what I want to show people is why 2019 to me is really extreme. So what I'm going to show you all really quick here is the chart for December 15th of 1284. That's a long time ago. And in Western astrology, back then, we had Saturn in its home sign of Capricorn and Pluto in Capricorn in conjunction. We had Jupiter as well in Capricorn in its fall position. And we also had what you all call Rahu, but we call the North Node in Capricorn, okay? So that's a lot Of course, the sun was here, Mars was here. But I mean, just this Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 1284 was big because Pluto's on a 248-year cycle, and Saturn's on its 29 and a half, 30-year cycle. So they meet up about every 35 years. But every time they meet up in Capricorn, it takes hundreds of years. So it was 1284. And then the time after that, Saturn and Pluto met up in Capricorn, which is a big deal because Saturn's at its own sign in Capricorn. It's dignified there.
Right.
So it's the most powerful that Saturn can be. And when you add Pluto to the mix in Western astrology, if you don't know too much about Pluto, Pluto is traditionally known to destroy. It is also an enhancer to any other planet. I kind of call it a supercharger in the zodiac. Like it just is a penetrator, and it pretty much is a higher octave of Mars as the sense of a malefic aspect of Mars that is very, I'm not going to listen. I'm just here to be the Grim Reaper, and I'm sorry grandma's dying today, to move on to the beauty of a new life for a baby somewhere else kind of energy. Pluto is very, doesn't listen. It's very kind of Saturnian too, where I always look at Saturn as very, it's just here to execute its job. Like it's not gonna get persuaded to do anything else. It's gonna do its job, and it's gonna execute what it needs to. Pluto does it in a little bit more of a harsher way than Saturn, because Pluto gets to the truth of things. It penetrates through secrets. It penetrates through, anything, and it has an ability to feel overwhelming. It just is so powerful. It's like very kind of like radiation energy or chemotherapy energy. It's
Right.
a very harsh element to it, but it does bring out the extremes of things. So
The co-ruler of Scorpio in Vedic, in modern Western astrology. And just to say, I definitely see the use of outer planets. So I don't use them in my Vedic astrology practice for the most part, because we're looking at smaller cycles, but I've definitely looked at them in larger cycles. And there's so many good timing, there's so many powerful timing structures, but Western astrology really revolves a lot around how outers interface with inner planets, and especially when you're looking at longer generational cycles like what David's doing here. Outer planets, just because their transits are longer, when they join, again, you can measure out longer epochs of time with the outer planets really well.
yeah, I mean, and so what's interesting is, so when you get to 1284, I mean, if you think about Saturn, let's just say in Capricorn, and this deals with the structures of government and the structures of control, and even more importantly, it also has to deal with looking at who is in power, basically, right?
Yeah.
And you look at that time as really when the Catholic Church comes to its peak of power, because coming out of the first millennium after the so-called Christ death, and you come out of the 1000s and you get into this 1200 period, this is where the Catholic Church becomes at its most extreme, because at this time you have the church telling the kings of England and France, basically, you can go to war or not. You can do this or not. You cannot get divorced. And then you get people like King Henry VIII who goes, "Oh no, I want a divorce. So I'm going to create my own church, and I'm going to, kill my wives," basically, in a crazy way. So Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn definitely at that time, and every time, brings out and reveals the power structure, but then at the same time, there's a Plutonian element of destruction of that system too. So the Catholic Church had the peak of its control while at the same time starting to lose it. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy. And
I just had to look really quick at 1284. One of the things that I just pulled up was the Pied Piper of Hamelin.
Yeah, I know that whole story with the rats and
Yeah. So that was June 26th, 1284.
Yeah. And, you get into some weird things with Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn, because we've only had 3 this century, or millennium, sorry, it's such a long thing, millennium, and we're about to enter the 3rd one, which is in 2019. So so you get this one that happened in 1284, and I think the year that King Henry VIII, I would have to what was his year that he did it? I'll have to find it real quick.
I also have a thing here. I also have the computer. Henry VIII did what?
When Henry VIII, left the England one was the next Saturn Pluto. So that's what I'm going to show. But
Anglican Church.
Yes, when he created he created the
Anglican Church.
Yeah, and then he defected from basically the
34 to 1547. It looks like 1530 to 1540.
Yeah. So, because he was born 1491, and then was King England from 1509. Yeah, and then so I'm going to show you guys in the next one. But in the 1284 time, I think that what was the most interesting, and what I'm going to show right now again in the chart, I'm going to share again here.
Yeah.
Is there was an opposition to Saturn and Pluto to the planet Uranus, which is like in astrology in Western, Uranus rules society, the people.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is it was this control system against the people, because if you get into the 1300s, once this transit kind of enacts, it lasts for the hundreds of years that it takes to get out of it, basically, in this zone, because Saturn and Pluto don't meet till 1517. So that's how long it takes again in Capricorn.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the cycle. So you're drawing a comparison to things like the power of the Catholic Church at the time, and then it experienced another shift by the time Henry VIII came.
Correct.
200-300 years later, then he broke off and sort of seceded from just the tyranny of the Holy Roman Empire Catholic Church, and established the Anglican Church in England with the same recurrence transit, right?
Correct. So I want to show this opposition, because what happened in the 1300s was the Black Plague. It was the Dark Ages. There was no information really about that time, because of in Western society at the time, especially in European world, people were dealing with the plague, but also the Catholic Church was in such power against the people. It was like, no, if you do this, you're kind of castrated, right? So it's interesting, because I'll just go to 1517 now, when the next Saturn Pluto happens. And what's interesting is when you look at it this time, it's enshrined to Uranus. So it's in an opposite. Uranus is in Taurus. So the people start to be able to break free of it. And the Renaissance period is the beginning of the 1500s.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You get this totally different version of it, and so it creates the new structures of power. So and it really was kind of the end of the power of the Catholic Church as far as true control over the people. People start, because it's also the Reformation time in 1517 of Martin Luther as well.
Yeah, the Jacobin Revolution started in 1517.
Yeah, so I mean, to have Saturn, Pluto exactly, here they are, 2 and 3 degree, and there's Uranus trining it, and
that's awesome, because the trine is, and again, this is great for all students to understand that the trine is a friendly aspect that creates opportunity and inspiration and growth. And so you're seeing here in the second in this first recurrence, that not only did Henry VIII establish like the Anglican Church and a separate way to express religion, but most importantly perhaps is Martin Luther and the Jacobin Revolution, where you see that, because the other quality of a Uranus is that individuality, that eccentric liberating force that says, I won't be contained, I won't be controlled, I'm going to express my unique power. And so the individual rising up against tyranny is very much, especially unmasked, like cultures rising up against tyranny, is also a quality of Uranus, correct?
Correct. Yeah, because in especially in Greek mythology, actually Uranus is the father of Saturn.
Yeah.
And so there's this weird element where you would think it would be opposite. You'd think that the child would be the more of the rebeller, but it was interesting that Kronos, Saturn, eats his own children and is very kind of destructive. And Uranus is the ruler of the air, right? So he's the god of air. So he wants to bring people up to the higher places. He wants to bring people to the closest to God, literally, because it's about freedom, it's about expression, and it's a beautiful. Uranus is beautiful, but it also is very innovative. It was found in the 1700s by a telescope, which kind of gives it the whole identity of these weird contraptions or weird electronic devices or anything that's
technological advance. Well, the technological. Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, but the whole Martin Luther Protestant Reformation was driven by the technology of the printing press. It was completely driven by technology. The whole Renaissance was. That's what this moment in time is showing, is that progress and empowering the individual through technology is going to overturn the tyranny of the church and the landed power. And we can make that directly comparable to today, where we have, tyranny of oppressive governments, however we want to look at it, and the liberation, like the democratization of information and knowledge through things like the internet. And I mean, look at what we're doing now. You're sitting where you are, I'm sitting here.
Yeah.
Power is no longer even concentrated around corporate entities, even creatively. Like, I grew up as a musician, and as a musician, you needed a record company to sort of lend you all this money that you pay back for the rest of your life in order to cut, in order to even cut a record. Now you can cut a record and an album in your home. So the democratization of information is also what's driving things now, as it did back in the time of the Renaissance.
Yeah, and what's interesting is during these Saturn Plutos, so if I kind of bring it back to a month, you got K2, which is with Saturn Pluto, as they're starting to come together. So in October of 1517, as Saturn's leaving Sagittarius, it's going to come over K2, as Pluto had just been with K2. And it's interesting because this is exactly what we're about to go through in 2019, the same exact alignment with Uranus trining it all in a very unique way. So that's good news, because I'll be honest, if it would have been the 1284 alignment, I wouldn't have been happy. I would have been pretty upset as an astrologer having Uranus in opposition.
And it's because of the opposition rather than the trine. I want to just... Yeah, that's why I said, because everyone's probably not, everyone might not be so clued into that the trine is the favorable aspect. The opposition is the tense one. It's the one that makes like the oppression and the church having its control. And they did it through selling indulgences. It was also very much monetary and guilt trips and all that heavy stuff you would expect, right? Yeah. By the oppressive nature of Saturn and Pluto. But then the Uranus trine introduces individuality. And of course, the trine is the favorable aspect that allows us to be inspired. It's a trinal house, the 5th and the 9th houses. Now, it was the waxing trine. It was the waxing trine from the 5th house. What's the trine now? Is it in 9th or 5th?
I'll show you all now. So we can go to today. And so as we look at today, and I can zoom in. So we're about to have an eclipse, number one. But here's Saturn today at 11 degrees, and here's Pluto at 20 degrees. And interesting.
And K2 right there, too.
And there's K2 right there at 26 coming towards Pluto. And if we look at Uranus, here it is in Aries, about to come direct, literally 16 hours after the eclipse.
Oh, wow.
It comes direct, and all the planets are direct. Even the outer planets are direct.
Right.
Time, which is very rare.
Very rare. Well, they're all on that side of the zodiac right now.
Yeah, but so Uranus is coming into Taurus on March 6th. And this Saturn-Pluto takes a while, because even though they're in the same sign, they don't get until the very end of the year into their very close conjunction and actually touching each other. But we are in a year to the buildup of this. And so to me, if we look at the kind of the world scale right now, we can all feel we're coming to this big shift point with not only the powers of government and control, but also this element of people and needing, because I think Uranus and Taurus to me is not only of course is liberation, but it's liberation for what's important for people, because I think Uranus and Taurus is about, you know, a better value of the world itself, because Uranus also rules the world, the earth, and it also rules, you know, people getting what they really deserve, that they feel that they deserve, because they're no longer willing to take crap anymore. Taurus doesn't take crap. Taurus, it sets its, you know, parameters of this is my value, this is what we deserve, and if we're not going to get it with Uranus there, it says we're going to go get it, you know. And I feel that the planet and where people are at are sick of the way that a lot of the rules and these power structures and these, and I hate to say it, but there's people out there who are trying to control things so much, because when you get that in Western astrology, especially when you get the South Node or K2, it really is more of a physical reality of the planets it starts to touch. So when you get Pluto and Capricorn, you get greedy, you know, power hungry people exposed. Like K2 like exposes them, like, hey, there you are. You know?
K2, yeah, K2 and Rahu both are explosive forces that reveal, I mean, they literally reveal darkness because they're eclipse points. I mean, that's what they're, you know, the points are always there. So when it's very easy to understand what the nodes do when you understand what eclipses do. I mean, like, or what they show. Those shadows are always there. Yeah. But what happens on eclipses is the shadow now comes and literally blocks out the lights and reveals the shadow. So it's always there. And so what K2 does is create this kind of explosiveness based on like a lot of the past, let's say, violations and oppression and whatnot. This is the upcoming eclipse that we're having on January 4th, January 5th or 6th. It's a K2 eclipse, which again really exposes a lot of the, let's say, crimes of the past. And that's in our daily lives too. It's not just in the world. It's all of us are going to have to deal with that. And again, all of our own hidden, you know, problems that we've been hiding from ourselves can explode in our own life. Rahu explodes things toward the future. Like the Rahu end of the eclipse, that happens the second part, when it's Rahu eclipsing the sun. Rahu is very futuristic. So rather than about the, like I say, the crimes of the past, for example, Rahu blows things up for the future. Okay, and again, this is how those eclipses work with each other, because the, you know, the K2 eclipse is about, okay, you're going to see some ugly stuff that's been going on, and Rahu 6 months later is now, here's stuff where you're, you know, where you're sort of heading as a result, so to speak. It's one way to look at it, but it's these flashpoints, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And what's interesting is seeing this K2 Pluto eclipse with Saturn in its home sign, and I'm running right now. It's January 5th, the one that we're about to have here in a couple days, 2019. Mercury in Western astrology just enters into this space, and we have all these energies in their home sign. So we have Mars, which is in its home sign of Aries, Neptune, which is in its home sign of Pisces. We've got the Saturn element in its home of Capricorn, Jupiter at its home in Sagittarius. But what's also interesting in the rarity of 2019 is Jupiter is starting to make a 90-degree square to Neptune in its home sign, which we haven't seen since 1852. And in 1852 and 1853 was the whole battle about slavery beginning. It was the first, it was the big book, Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852.
John Brown.
That was starting to show that, hey, slavery's not good, right? And it was written by a white person, which was kind of like a big deal, right? Kind of defending the blacks and how this is wrong. And so we're having the same battle now in life about what's right and what's wrong in belief systems and in culture, and more importantly, like something that's deeply spiritually, because in Western, Neptune rules the this very deep Piscean spiritual, you know, need, and what is true compassionate and what is truly not, I guess you could say, delusional, you know, like, because some people are delusional at this moment over belief systems that could be completely not good for the planet, and others, and this is where it becomes a clash. And unfortunately, the Civil War came right at the end of Neptune's transit through Pisces in Western. Literally, if you look at going into 1861 with Lincoln coming into presidency and so forth, Neptune comes into Aries and bang, we're in a war, you know? And what's interesting with this, though, is to have this eclipse. It's also happening at what we call in Western the midpoint between Saturn and Pluto. So Saturn and Pluto are 9 degrees apart here, and it's at 15 degrees. So in between 11 and 20 is the midpoint, which means Saturn and Pluto are almost in many ways like two big bullocks, or two big, you know, I always look at them as like two gangsters on the street corner, like in between the eclipse.
Yeah.
And this eclipse is kind of feeling really stressed out in Capricorn, especially with the South Node there and K2 and Pluto, and there's major demands on people in their life right now to get where they've got to go, but they this Jupiter Neptune thing that confuses things, because it really starts to like separate people based off their belief structures and which direction they're all going to go on their path. It's almost like everything is shifting here, you know? And
I would bring up, absolutely, yeah, that's awesome, dude. And I knew you would. It's funny because even though we didn't really plan what we were going to talk about, I knew we would get into that. You know, this is the thing that people should understand, is the same themes are shown in Vedic astrology. You can see my screen, right, Dave?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So this is the way the chart looks, and I brought up the outers as well. In the sidereal Vedic chart, you see this. Here's Pluto, Sun, Saturn, Mercury on the eclipse, and then this is the square David was talking about, 1837 of Jupiter, Neptune at 20. And, you know, the signs change, but it's the same relationship, the same spatial relationship between the planets. And by the way, this is the reason why all zodiacs work, because the most important things, as you see, now there's Capricorn qualities, what David is saying, but the main things are the connection of the planets arriving and departing with each other, and the spatial relationship between the planets. Again, like Saturn, like you were saying, Saturn, Pluto coming together, then Uranus squaring, Uranus opposing, and trining, and, you know, all of that. The signs are the backdrop, but it's the planets interacting. They're the ones that create the cycles, with the zodiac being the backdrop. Of course, the zodiac is also important, but you'll see similar themes play out. And, you know, it's funny because I just did my 2019 forecast, and based on, you know, similar but different ways of arriving at the answer, I said the biggest things that we're going to be dealing with this year, because all these planets are in Sagittarius, which again is about our beliefs, our preconceived ideas about culture, race. We see all these possible race relations, migrants, the otherisms. There's the other people, the Republicans, the Democrats, the Muslims, the whites, the Mexicans, the wall, keep the people away, like trying to resist the unification and the upliftment of humanity as a holistic, you know, framework here on Earth, that we need to come together to save it, or we're going to lose it. And the real kind of emergence, first a kind of descent into the, you know, the revelation of the darkness. Yeah. And then hopefully, I think, and there will be a kind of redemption on the other end of it, but especially the first part of the year with these first eclipses, with the Saturn K2 eclipse, because, you know, Saturn K2 is the big thing in 2019 from the from the Vedic perspective, as it tracks back and forth for 6 months, you know, and other things. But this first part of the year is going to have a lot of those similar themes of heaviness, but toward the same philosophy, especially that you were just talking about with this Jupiter-Neptune square, and the need to really understand that we're in this together, and all of that otherism. Otherism is the big, you know, it's one of the biggest lessons this year.
Yeah, so in Vedic here, what is the nakshatra that this eclipse is happening in?
It's in Purva Ashada, which is literally it literally means early victory. And in Sagittarius, you have three nakshatras. The first one is called Mula, which means root, and it's where we pull out by the root. And it's at the very beginning of Sagittarius, after the sort of darkness and kind of, potential pathos of Scorpio, where we have to face our, vulnerabilities and fears. The first section of Sagittarius is actually very transformative and wild. It's literally the plane of the galaxy. It's like the core of the galaxy. It's called Mula, the nakshatra, and it uproots. It pulls out by the roots all of that darkness so that we can plant those seeds of hope, which is what Sagittarius is about. It's that belief system that comes after you face the kind of dark night of the soul and your mortality and your vulnerability of Scorpio. Again, we feel it in Scorpio. It gets transformed into higher purpose in Sagittarius. That's the next sign after Scorpio, right? And so the first nakshatra is Mula, where we uproot and plant new seeds. The nakshatra after that is where this first eclipse is. That's in Purva Ashada, which is ruled by the goddess Apus, or the ocean, which is related to devotion and nurturing and watering those seeds that we plant in Mula. So this eclipse is in that nakshatra. This first eclipse is in the nakshatra of Purva Ashada, which is ruled by the god Apus. It's literally about devotion, the ocean of love and beauty. Just like with seeds, when you plant a seed, the seed grows not because you just throw it in the ground and walk away. No, you got to go back and water it and nurture it and care for it and give it love and guide it through that phase of becoming a sapling. And you got to protect it. You have to, and it's the same is true with all of us. The successes that we're going to have in life are more based on how we were nurtured when we were like 2 years old than they are based on things that happen later. So that's really the seed principle of this nakshatra. So we plant the seeds in Mula after we uproot what came before and then plant new seeds. Then we nurture those seeds in Purva Ashada, which also means early victory.
Interesting.
It's early victory, because our early victories in life are the ones that create the possibility of the later victory, which is the next nakshatra called Uttara Ashada. So this is in the nakshatra of Purva Ashada, which is, again, it's related to Apus, the ocean, devotion, and nurturing. So this is why I feel like even though this eclipse is it's intense time, because we have all this energy concentrated, and of course it's not just an eclipse, but the other main thing that we're feeling this eclipse is it's joined Saturn, because every eclipse is joined Saturn. Right?
I know, which I think it doesn't matter what form of astrology that you do, it's going to be intense. Well, all astrology was Saturn.
And that's what I'm saying. This is why all astrology works, because the planets are the activating forces. They're the grahas. They're the deities, right? That's where the power comes from. And of course, the signs give a different quality to it. Absolutely. This is why people need to get their, find the zodiac that works best for them. And so, but regardless of that, this eclipse is, even if Pluto is not there, which again, the fact that it is there brings even more of that transformative, destructive potential to destroy
and rawness. It brings out, it literally cuts away like all the skin and just brings it, to where you're looking at guts, like it's that raw. So when you add that rawness to this whole eclipse with Saturn there, you're seeing Saturn as the bones, it's almost like looking at the bones of, inside the structures of it all, and how it's like an open heart surgery, in many ways. It's like no eyeglasses on, like looking at it like, oh man, this is intense in my life right now. I gotta, there's a calling I feel for people right now in their life to, Saturn asks us to step up, right? To grow up, to take control of the situations again, and to have integrity. And I feel that all of us at this moment are realizing that the past, we've learned a lot, but you know what? We ain't going to do those things that aren't of integrity anymore. I think we've all learned lessons of that. And I think that 2019 is not going to take it easy on people anymore who don't want to play by rules or who don't want to contribute to the world in a place of integrity anymore. And I think that there is an element of integrity that is the highest form that we've seen in a long time.
Well, and what happens is, you know, we can typically get overwhelmed with the emotion of things, with the feeling of things. That's always the case. Like, when's it going to stop? Because we're being triggered emotionally, and people don't have, unless people have spiritual practices or whatnot, we just get triggered by the emotion and we lose the potential that's underneath it, because the emotion is just the surface. And again, it's like a surfer riding a wave. You want the biggest wave because you go the fastest and the furthest much more quickly with a big wave. So we're going to get a big wave, but if we're just going to be afraid that the wave is too big, then we're just going to hide our head in the sand and not even get in the water and try to surf it. But if you have courage and you can see beyond just the emotion of it, it's that big wave that takes you the furthest, the fastest. And we're really going to be challenged to ride those karmic waves and not turn away. Because here's what I think is that we've all been kind of, because the last couple of years, especially with all the shifts, we could see it politically, and not just in this country, but all around the world. We've seen things, we've seen an underbelly that's been there the whole time, but it's just been revealed. And especially for a lot of conscious people and the ones that are hopefully going to take things into the next, you know, at that next level, at some point it just gets so yucky to keep facing this stuff, and people just get apathetic and they want to just turn away. And now is the time to show up again. You know, I made a Facebook update that said, it's time to, you know, instead of doing dream work, it's time to do reality work this year. Because, you know, we do a lot of sort of dream work where we connect to dreams and we kind of don't want to face the unpleasantness of the world. Well, now we're going to see these things, and it's great to see it and not turn away from the blood and guts of it, and instead take that intensity and allow it to take you right to the truth. Because that's one of the things that happens when all this energy concentrates, is that you have to face it. And once you do face it, you realize your capacity.
Yes. And there's that Venus-Jupiter, which are coming closer, which actually, if you look at how astrology works in the morning, they're rising in the morning. So they're offering this bright light, as Venus is the morning star now, and Jupiter's there. That there's this part that's saying, hey, it's okay. When we wake up in the morning, there's these beautiful, you know, beneficial elements to things, even though right now, because the Sun and Saturn are in the same area, right after the morning comes and then the sun rises fully, now you got Sun and Saturn. There's this kind of, oh gosh, you know, I got to deal with these things. But I think this Venus-Jupiter that's getting closer is reminding us that there's beauty within all this. There's good things that can happen through all this. And I think a lot of people have to remind themselves of that, because we can kind of get caught up sometimes in our own stuff with Sun, Saturn, right? We can get a little overwhelmed by the harshness of just the feeling spiritually going around, or the things that we do have to face. But I think Venus and Jupiter are saying, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. It's almost like going to the doctor and thinking it's going to be horrible, but you actually get like kind of good news. But it was good that you went, because they found something that, oh, if you just start doing this, and you'll be better. Oh, okay. You know, like things I think seem way worse than really they are, in a sense that Venus and Jupiter say, if we do show up, there's so many options, there's so many people, there's so many good things that can happen if we do show up. If we don't, though, it's almost like Venus and Jupiter aren't going to give us much, because I think that Saturn is demanding us to show up in our lives to these big things. And Venus and Jupiter are the benefit that there are things there that will happen good if we show up. If we don't show up, it's like we don't get the candy or something.
And it's also, absolutely. And the other thing is the benefit of Saturn and Sun. And we don't even get see, here's the thing, here's the way I see it as well, is that we tend to, and I don't mean that you just said this or explain it like this, but we tend to also, even in the same way that I just described, we tend to focus on the emotion of something rather than the power of that thing. Saturn is always going to feel heavy. That's the feeling. That's why it's called a malefic. And again, astrologers, when they don't handle these things with grace, they say that, well, the fact that it's a malefic means it brings bad stuff. That's not what it means. It means it feels intense. It feels difficult. It's hard to bear the energy of Saturn. It's hard to bear the energy of Mars. It's hard to bear the energy of the nodes. Not because they're bad, but because it's hard to sit with it, because it shows things that Saturn shows our mistakes, our guilt, our fear, those things that we have a hard time bearing. We have a hard time looking at it. It doesn't mean it's bad. It means when we get over our emotion and stop trying to avoid it because it's hard to bear it, then we get all of the power of Saturn. Yeah. We get the power of Saturn when we're willing to be present with all of that. And the power of Saturn is the real jewel in many ways, because it's solitude, stillness, peace, self-acceptance, forgiveness, all of the stuff that we're really trying to get to, and making peace with our mistakes, with the mistakes of others, being present rather than triggered and worried about the future and burdened by the past and all. So again, because it's hard to bear those things and we focus on the emotion rather than the pure energy, Saturn becomes difficult. So this Saturn eclipse, and in fact, even much of 2019, if I could just show one of the biggest features of 2019 happens a little later. We talked about this a little bit before we started. I'll just run a month here. And you see, if we go forward a month, you see K2 is going to go into, so K2 goes into, this is Sagittarius. So of course we have a different zodiac, but you see K2 and Saturn right next to each other here, even in April. At the end of March 20.
And I think Saturn station in retrogrades on K2 exactly.
For 6 months. Yeah. So again, this is April 5th, but actually and it's within 2 degrees for like 6 months, because usually they just pass each other like that. But right. This year, Saturn's retrograde cycle is timed to K2, which is moving backwards. So you can see here, April 5th, K2 and Saturn are like within a couple degrees. If I go for the next month, again, like 1 degree, Saturn and K2, like almost exact, about 2 degrees. This is June. And then Saturn slows down exact on July 4th, 23, 29, 23, 26, because now Saturn is stationary direct. Then again, like 1 degree. So through October, they're like within 1 degree. Look, this is October 2nd, 1 degree. So this is like,
and they're going to be opposing the sun of the Constitution of America and this eclipse too.
Well, and the other big thing is that the eclipse in the summer, right? This is the other big feature here, if you want to call it a feature, is the eclipse in the summer is also going to be this is going to be pretty wild. The solar eclipse in the summer, let me put this forward a few days. When we have it in Gemini, it's also in what's called Ardra Nakshatra. So this one in the summer is also really powerful because we still have Saturn and K2 right on top of each other.
Yeah.
And it's in this nakshatra of Ardra, which is related to Lord Shiva, where things blow apart. This is the nakshatra of where almost every war happened. 9/11 happened when the moon went into Ardra. Hurricane Katrina, the tsunamis, and so much. This is the most destructive part of the zodiac, Ardra and Mula. This section, because this is where the plane of the galaxy runs. This is the galactic plane.
Yeah.
So this eclipse in the summer is also going to be very transformative, again, toward the future. This one we're getting here in January is very much about the past, like I said. This one here.
Yeah, dealing with the things that have to be faced and make choices with what you've accumulated.
What we've created. And again, if we want to look at it culturally and globally, it's like what we've created, this whole stuff that we already talked about, this either a complicity or compliance with this whole otherism. Well, it's somebody else's problem. I'm comfortable. Well, those Muslims, the Mexicans, the Republicans, the Democrats, we all do it. We all have our way of, well, I'm in this box and there's everybody else in the other boxes.
Yeah.
And having to, and as I said in my 2019 forecast, all of those paradigms are going to get blown up and exploded this year, and we're all going to be challenged. Regardless of where we come down on politics or what have you. This first eclipse is going to really expose a lot of what we've done, where we've been and what we've done. And the one in the summer is going to be much more about, about the future, I think, and how we can create that next thing. So we're going to see a lot of justice issues and wrangling this year as well. We can see that politically, even just with the new Congress and whatnot that just came.
Yeah.
I also want to show this thing really quickly because we talked about it before we went on. And again, not to make this big thing about Trump, but something very amazing about Vedic astrology you'll see is this is his chart, and he just went into his Jupiter-Saturn. Oops, why is this not? Okay. He just went into Jupiter-Saturn Dasha today. January 3rd, 2019. I didn't realize it was going to be today. I made a video about a month ago that said his life is about to really change because after the elections, after the November elections, the midterms, when the Democrats took over the House, and now there's going to be a lot of oversight and all this stuff. And it's like, I didn't realize that they were all going to be sworn in this day, but I could see, right around early January, he goes into Jupiter-Saturn. And of course, Saturn is Saturn. It's consequences. And so,
and you know what's even more crazy is his Saturn, his Venus, they're getting opposed by, in Western, that Pluto-Saturn conjunction that's going to be happening.
I'll let you pull up the chart in a second, just this last thing to show, but it is like, and you can see, that's interesting. It's not just interesting, it's this day. This is the beginning day this is like a 2.5 year cycle.
That's a big cycle, yeah.
It's a long cycle. This is the 2.5 year cycle that started today, the day that Congress was sworn in. I mean, his life just got a lot harder.
Which is even more ironic because I don't know if you know this, but when Jupiter and Saturn meet, every on the zeros, right? The zero years they meet. He's in the presidency while Jupiter and Saturn are coming. They're coming together next year.
Right. Did you want to share his chart? Because you can go ahead and take the screen over if you want.
Yeah, sure.
A couple things from the Vedic. You should be able to do it, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to pull up this sidereal chart a little bit too and show those couple things. But now it's back to you.
Yeah. So what's cool is we have. I think they have them under samples. They didn't even put them under.
By the way, I have to say I loved when you pulled up that chart from like 1284 and it said 1284 Santa Monica.
I know, yeah.
It's Santa Monica.
Oh, where is this chart? They put him under business. I have his chart here somewhere.
But I was just stunned. I'm eternally shocked and stunned and amazed by the precision of astrology because, again, I don't obsess over Trump's chart, anybody's chart, or all this stuff. I actually look and I notice after the midterms, I just checked it really quick and I was like, he's about to go into Jupiter-Saturn early next year. I didn't really look that close at the date, except for I knew it was around the time when the new Congress was going to start. And I'm like, get ready because his life's about to get a lot more serious, a lot more heavy consequences. And today I was just stunned. I actually noticed it before we did the call. I was like, let me look at his chart and see exactly when it happens. And I'm like, damn, it's today. I can't believe it. What's the likelihood that the exact day, and you see this
I know.
Astrology with dashas, it's just remarkable how they will work down to an exact day. Like, because it could have been tomorrow, it could have been yesterday, it could have been a week ago, and it would still be the same thing. It's still the same energy, but it's that day. Anyway.
It's that day, and that's the craziest part today. And it's literally everything's changing in the government today.
Yeah.
And
he goes into Jupiter-Saturn because he won the election like a week after his Jupiter Dasha started. Literally. And so from the moment after, and this was before he was even sworn in, like it was November 11th. I'm sorry, November 14th, he went into Jupiter Dasha, which is like a week after he won the election. He started Jupiter Dasha. The entire time he's been in Jupiter. Now he starts Jupiter-Saturn. I mean, it's remarkable that everything he's been doing as president and even his whole life now is like the day the new Congress comes and he gets oversight. maybe for the first time in his life, unfortunately for him. But anyway.
Yeah, so here's some of the crazy stuff that I'm seeing with him is, one, so he's got that Saturn-Venus conjunction, which, of course, in all astrology is kind of a, it's got its ups and its downs, but definitely could definitely bring the Venus qualities way down that it normally would like not to have Saturn there. So whenever he talks about how I don't drink, I don't do the, you know, it's like, but he's very, you know, and especially around people, he's very controlling about people, you know, that Saturn Venus element. And it's interesting to see if we look moving ahead. So what I'm running is a second wheel that I can run with. Right now it's where the planets are today, but if I go a couple months and we come to, here's June 14th. So he's got Saturn at 23. Pluto, for the first time in his life, because Pluto's on a 248-year cycle, is going to literally come to 23 degrees. Actually, it'll, yeah, see 23 with K2. Pluto, K2 are going to oppose his Saturn.
Oh,
exactly.
Ah!
And this is all in June, and then I can go a month before that. Oh, wait, so no, March, it starts to approach. I'm on the wrong side. March, and then April, yeah, April, there it is. And I could zoom in, yeah. So Pluto South Node, 23 degrees Saturn. Pluto's going to oppose it. Then I go a month farther. Pluto retrogrades, opposing his Saturn, just sits there. Just sits there.
Yeah.
And so in astrology, what we do in Western, we can, so Saturn rules Capricorn. So we can look at Capricorn in his chart. In certain house systems, he doesn't have actually a house in Placidus, but if I run equal chart, it's the 6th house of health. And so Saturn's a big ruler of health in the way that we'll run Western astrology. We also do something in Western where we actually, we do something called secondary progressions.
Right.
And
I actually did West. I did Western a little bit so I know how it works, but it's great to explain it though.
So today on January 3rd, his progressed moon, which means that for every year you're alive, we just move the chart 1 day forward. That's all we do.
1 degree. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just the day. So his new progressed day chart, you know, is, I forgot, he's 74 years old, right? 74 and a half. So it's basically, this is 74 and a half days, the planets, after his birthday for secondary progression. So what's interesting is if you see the moon here at 23 degrees of Leo, in 3 months, it's going to conjunct Mars at the exact same time. In 3 months, Pluto is going to oppose to Saturn with the South Node. So if we move months and we get to April 3rd of 2019, that's when Pluto is going to be at 23. You can't see it, but we just showed it. But progressed moon will be on Mars, and that will be a whole month on his Mars in the 12th house.
Yeah.
Very malefic, very 12th housey, while Pluto's opposing his Saturn in actual transit form. That's going to be very hard to get out of.
Yeah, I mean,
he's at the last 3 degrees of the 12th house in his progressed moon, which of course the last 3 degrees of the 12th house is the hardest event. It's always the you gotta try and get out. And he's in his balsamic phase of the moon because he has a progressed new moon that's starting, but it's not there yet. It's still not.
Oh yeah. So you look at you would look at the so you would also look at the lunar phases in the secondary progression chart.
And he's at the balsamic phase, and
yeah, that's very balsamic there, boo. That's
not a good balsamic, because
that's about as balsamic as you can get. That's
yeah, and it's all on top of the star Regulus, which is in, you know, it's in Leo, of course, and it's holding the accountability.
Mars, but that's also on his natal Mars, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. That's the hardest part, I think, is in its 12th house too. Mars in the 12th, you know.
Yeah.
And so if we look real quick at transits again as the second chart, this is what I did in my magazine this year. I said this is, I'm actually worried for him as a human being, because if we move up to the same month, so March 3rd into April 3rd, so we'll go to that April 3rd when his progressed moon will be on his Mars, Pluto will be opposed to Saturn, Neptune will be square his Uranus, which rules the nervous system, and Neptune also as well, when it's in hard aspects, can rule psychological issues, psychological, you know, breakdowns, and with Uranus there, it's psychological, you know, mind, especially because it's in Gemini is Uranus, and his Rahu, his North Node is conjunct Uranus, and so now Neptune's going to square it. And this year, Mercury retrograde is on top of Neptune and will station on top of Neptune and come direct, squaring his Mercury square Uranus. I mean, I'm predicting that he is going to go through a complete mental breakdown.
No, it's extremely. There's no question that this is a seriously dangerous period. Not just for him personally, but for all of us, because he's got too much power to be so unstable, just in general. Let alone what he's about to go through.
It will be conjunct his Saturn exactly.
I know too. Yeah. There's nothing pleasant or enjoyable. I don't enjoy any of this. Even
nobody. That's what I said. As a human being, I think we both care as astrologers. Like I recommended in my magazine. I said go at least get a therapist or get somebody that you can trust. And I said go take some time off. Like
my thing has always been with him, and people don't like that I call out, you know, but even publicly what everybody sees is that he doesn't tell the truth. He's so used to a certain lifestyle of kind of, you know, as he says, you know, what is it, truthful hyperbole. It's really just kind of New York businessman BS, reality star saying anything. You just can't do that stuff as president. And then and he's just not in his element. And it's so obvious that this is not good for the country, regardless. At least this is my feeling of just the unpredictability, regardless of the policies. And the dangerous part is the consequences that I know would come, whether people agree with that or not. We're seeing the result of having that kind of a personality in that position. It's not a matter of hating him personally. It's just we all have a dharma. It's called dharma.
Yeah.
His dharma and his purpose and his station in life was to do what he was doing, not to become president of the United States. It's like if I tried to become president of the United States, it would be the wrong thing for me to do. It's not my dharma. I would get destroyed because this crazy astrologer or whatever, any of us. So when people get out of their station and they get out of their lane,
well, that's
and they get seduced by their ego and seduced by power.
Eclipse, it's like he's kind of an alien that's in and out of places all the time. Like,
yeah. And it happened in his Rahu Dasha, Rahu Mars. He never thought he would win. He didn't even do it because he wanted to win. He wanted to win. He didn't want to do the job. He wanted to win the job, not do the job, which was obvious to everybody. That's why it doesn't even hardly work. He stays in his house and hides out. He doesn't like, for instance, Obama loved being president. He loved the work. He loved the meetings and the stuff. And there are people that's their dharma. Bill Clinton loved it. It doesn't matter what you think of them as a president. It's just you can see when someone is in their station and in their dharma. They love the policy. They love to do the work. They like to show up and do the work of legislating and negotiating and all. Other people, that's not their dharma. Even George W. Bush, you could tell, it didn't feel like that was really his dharma. His dharma was to own a baseball team and hang out, and that's what he liked to do. Yeah. Trump likes this. He likes attention. He likes celebrity. He likes this. That's not.
Now this Rahu Venus Saturn thing of his coming up. I think we're starting to. I mean, it's kind of already starting with this whole obsession with the wall, right? Like a little bit, right? Like he just is. This is his Venus Saturn. I think issue is like there's just some things he will not like. He will do anything it will take to get it, to have it, you know. And
but I even think I'm a little more cynical because I don't even think it's because of that he really thinks or cares that it's the right policy. I don't know if he does anything because
whatever he wants. It just is. for
He
whatever.
does it because no, I just want to say, I'm not even sure that I think he does anything because he thinks it's necessarily the right policy. He does it because he wants to win, because he wants to he wants to say, I did it. And this is why, I mean, I don't know how close you track this, but they already passed, they passed a bill that he agreed to, and he was ready to sign it. And then when Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh and his whole conservative base flared up and said, that's it, you're no more my, and they freaked out. Then he said, okay, I'm not going to do it because of a violation of some ideology that somebody else told him. It wasn't because of his conviction. He was like, all right, whatever. He's had 2 years to make sure the wall gets funded. He could have done it before. Anyway, without getting in the weeds about policy, what I'm saying is that I think he's not in his dharma. He's driven by things that others aren't driven by. Others are driven by this incremental kind of policy making and whatnot, and he's not. He's driven by other things that have to do with, like, you know, again, attention and winning feuds and Twitter battles and other things that's just not the place to do that. Do it as a celebrity on TV, it's fine. Do it as president, and it's going to catch up with you, and it's going to catch up with all of us, which is what we're seeing.
Yeah, and
I even agree with some of the stuff he does. I think it'd be great to end all those wars, the war in Syria and all that would be great. But his approach to it is like, who knows if he's even going to stick to it or why he's doing it. That's the part that's dangerous. It's dangerous for all of us, and we have to see it and stop just getting so triggered about it because, oh, you don't like Trump, you're a mainstream media boy, or just, you know, again, this is the stuff that we're all doing to each other as well, instead of looking at things with intelligence and nuance. These are nuanced issues that implicate all of us.
Yeah, and I think at this chart, being born with the sun in Uranus in Western is, it's a disruptor, and it is somebody out of place. Uranus is always out of place.
Yeah, exactly.
So in a way, and especially in the 10th house, it's a public person out of place on an eclipse with his full moon, right? Lunar eclipse in the 4th house. Like, he'd rather be really at home, but he's got his sun and his Rahu ego thing, right? And a Mars on the ascendant in Leo. Even in Vedic, he's got Mars in Maga, right? Like,
yeah, I'll pull the chart up and show. I'll show
like he's got, because I know a little bit. I can hang with you guys. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Well, again, this is why I can go back and forth. Like, I don't usually read the chart, but the thing that's constant and that people should know is that aside from the chart style and the signs, the planets are the same. This is why you can read the same person. He's still got Mars right on the ascendant. He's still got Sun Rahu. Whether Uranus is there or not, it's still the same. But even with Uranus there,
that's all close though. That's like, wow, you know, like, woo.
Yeah, from a Western perspective, you see even more. And even as a real estate mogul, or as an as a reality TV show star or whatever, he's his own kind of, he's like from another world. He's like incarnated. He's an outsider. He's an eccentric outsider, unique personality. This is why he's been able to, you know, really distinguish himself as a unique individual. Anyone who was born on eclipses or near eclipses, they're kind of an otherworldly figure, so to speak. And so he was that before he decided to become president and, you know, and to run for it. It's very easy to see, though, that this is it so much revolves around ego and his own persona and his own personality, not about service. And again, all politicians have egos, for sure. Nobody would say, I think I should be president and not have an ego, of course. But there are others who they really are drawn to public service. And you can tell because they do it their whole life. They start as community organizers. They work in they become elected to local governments. And this is what they like to do. They like to be in that kind of community organizing, compromising, deal-making kind of thing. That's a whole kind of dharma. And that's not his dharma. It never has been. He's lived like a king, like a dictator, even in his business. It's not an insult. It's just the truth. He hasn't ever had to answer to anybody. It's all about him, which is fine. I mean, that's what Rahu's sun gives you. It gives you the power.
Mars ascendant in Maga, like that combined is
as Leo, right? And obviously, we'll see the whole chart, you know, revolves around that, and that's fine. That's someone in their dharma, successful in that, doing that. regardless of anything that might have been shady or any other kinds of stuff, it's still, this is his dharma to be able to do that and to entertain people and to be, I actually thought he was an interesting, entertaining guy for years. He definitely seemed to start losing it around the 90s when he started feuding with Rosie O'Donnell and all, and just, it was like, man, this guy's kind of losing it a little bit.
Well, I think that's what manga teaches, right? Is like, it's ancestral and it's very spiritual as being a communicator of the ancestral spirit. And I think that he's, in a way, got it kind of mixed up in his own, like, I think he does want to help people, but I think that it comes across wrong, and at the same time it loses its loses its truth and gets convoluted by his own ego. So I think that the intention's there, but I think that what happens is it gets cut off by his Rahu sun.
Of course, yeah.
And then it's like now and especially for him, it's all, you know, it's very just, especially what in Vedic, it's Taurus, right? It's like at the last degree, like.
Yeah, and of course he wants, of course, and it's not, and again, I'm not saying he's a monster. Of course he wants to help. He's doing his best. He's just not in his dharma. Again, this is a really good, he's a great example of dharma. What dharma actually means.
I've ever seen in astrology with, like, because it's almost like with the eclipse and the connections, it's just like you don't see this kind of a chart.
Yeah, that's why he's a good case study, because like we were talking about before we started, it's so out there, it's so expressive. But again, it's a great example of what we call dharma, where people need to find their station in life. Just like someone who goes to work at a job they don't really like and they haven't really found their unique nature. They haven't been able to succeed at it and really feel good about what they're doing. We're all looking for our swadharma, our purpose. You and I are lucky to have found it and to be able to do it. And we're in sync with our dharma, with our purpose. He was in sync with his dharma and his purpose. Real estate, celebrity, whatnot. He was doing his thing and whatnot. When someone goes outside of their dharma and they're seduced by ego and the power of the ego to get more and more and more, you see it even online, even like with perhaps even like celebrities on YouTube and celebrity astrologers even, or whatever, where when people start getting outside of themselves because they're seduced by the potential power they could have, or you know, wow, man, if I do this, I can get more views or more fame or something like that. Then we start to get outside of our dharma and we start to get seduced by kama and the ego, what's called kama, or the ego. So he's an example of that to me, but it's dangerous for the country and for the world, as we see, because it's so unsettling and unstable.
Yeah, it is. And especially from what I was showing you with the Neptune stuff hitting his chart, and then he's got.
You can pull the chart up again. Go ahead and pull it up again from your point of view.
It just is. To me, that's what's scaring me is this Pluto opposed Saturn, Neptune square Uranus. So when you're having outer planets which deal with subconscious and psychological parts of the brain, usually is what they deal with. They deal with those really like deep subconscious layers that people aren't even aware of, you know, like the subconscious triggers with Neptune, and then Pluto kind of deals with this deeper kind of you know, revealing of stuff that's kind of really deeply hidden. And Pluto also, when it comes in opposition with Saturn, is very hard because he is going to be forced to, it's kind of like in tarot, the tower card, or, you know, we'll use his real estate, like a tower falling, you know, like there's this, it is kind of like a house of cards, right? Pluto, Saturn to me is house of cards, like falling, you know, like, oh man, how am I gonna, and the grip with that Rahu on his Saturn is like, I will not let it go. You know, like I will not let go of the control, and Pluto is demanding, you know, to let go and try a different way. Pluto will give you the option usually of, if you change, I'll allow you to live, but if you don't, I don't know. And I think that the scariest thing to me, and I always believe there's universal intervention if something was gnarly going to happen, But my biggest prediction to him is a very hard health situation coming. That's what I'm feeling is coming in this late winter and spring, that it's just going to become so much mentally and spiritually. And it's almost like a spiritual crisis when you get Neptune in square to anything, especially in Gemini, in Western with his Uranus, which deals with the nervous system. It's almost like, and also, especially because I know in Vedic, you guys use the moon as the mind, very deeply, parts of it. Neptune's getting ready to square his moon too for the first time in his life, and Neptune's home sign, so it makes the mind even go crazier and like to where not crazy as what he'll do, but crazy inside to where he almost will become a hermit or like
well, he already is. Yeah, he already is. And when you and his natal chart, when you look at it with Vedic, I'll just show, is very clear. K2 moon in Scorpio, the moon is debilitated with K2 exact degree. It's already, you already see he's got that kind of paranoid, kind of control freak quality to his mind. And what you know, it's really important just to know what the mind is. The mind is the feeling, emotional structure. That's the support of the mind. That's why in Vedic it's the mind. Mercury is the intellect. It's that part of the, you know, there are different qualities of the mind. Mercury is the intellect that allows us to think clearly and rationally and to, you know, literally have intelligence. It's called buddhi or intelligence. But the intelligence is born from the manas or the heart, basically. This is what the moon is. The heart is the anchor of all of it. Even if you have a good mind, which he does, he's a great example of this. His Mercury in sidereal is in Gemini. He's no dummy. He knows exactly what he's a smart person. He's extremely smart. You don't get that successful without being able to figure things out, basically, and having a strong intellect. And you can see, particularly when he was younger, very strong intellect, but the intellect rides on top of the heart feeling structure.
Yeah.
So the intellect can be used for good or for corrupt purposes. A smart person can use their intelligence to do good stuff or to do bad stuff. This is why Mercury is also neutral. Mercury is just helpful, and it's how the intellect helps us figure things out so that we can get what we want. But what do we want? A lot of that emanates from the heart.
Yeah.
And that's when we say the mind in Indian thinking, where you actually mean the heart. And it's a very interesting way to look at it, because in the Eastern sense, the mind is the heart. And literally, even when you ask people in the West, I'm sorry, in the East, when you say, where does your mind in your body, they'll point to the heart. This is the mind. The mind starts from here. So that's literally where the mind is. It's how they think about it. So this is why the moon is the anchor of everything, including the intellect. So that's the difference. That's the distinction. And that's why the moon is so important in Vedic thinking, because it's the structure of everything. You could be going about your life, but then you start feeling a certain way, and it can undermine everything. It pulls the house of cards comes tumbling down, so to speak, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting is two planets that are retrograde are Neptune and Jupiter too, which is kind of an interesting thing to me, because I feel like for him too, if we look in Western, he's got this Jupiter element that's so intense, especially about his belief system. And he's got what we in Western we use Chiron, which is an asteroid that represents kind of a wounded feeling. And for him, it's in Libra. There's this feeling of everything's unfair. You know, everything's unfair. Everything's unfair.
Oh,
yeah. And also, I think, there's that Neptune position too with him there of kind of like, trying to bring fairness, like with this is fair about this or this, like, so he's getting almost caught up into these balances of everybody else, but without looking at his own balance within himself.
And one of the things I see, to me, he shows more qualities of the kind of paranoia. It's not that he thinks everything's unfair to him. It's almost just like this victim mentality. I really see it as the negative Scorpio energy. That's the way it seems to me, anyway. That's how I've interpreted that part of his character.
Yeah, it's an interesting space that Jupiter's going to come over this really quick here.
Yeah, everything is unfair. Like everything is not just he's unfair, but everybody's laughing at us. Everybody treats the U.S. unfair. Everything is unfair. It's like, and also feeling personally unfair. Fake news every time they report something that's, even if it, obviously most of the time it's not fake. It's like show a video of him saying something and it's called fake news. Again, but it's so unfair to him. It's really the negative Scorpio victim mentality, which can happen when Scorpio is a negative. It's a debilitated moon with K2. It's like, boy, that's heavy on the mind. That's a heavy, difficult emotional space to exist in.
Yeah, and it's in Western, it's getting hard transits. Not only, of course, Jupiter's going to be there, but to really kind of over amplify that position. But you got Neptune getting ready to make hard aspects there, and you got Mercury retrograde that's going to be making hard aspects there too, coming up this end of the winter, beginning of spring. So
for all of us, so for the country in general, it could be a pretty intense time.
Oh, yeah, because this Mercury retrograde will square his sun, it will square his moon. It's going to be making hard aspects to his whole entire, big foundation of his nodes and his sun and his full moon. Yeah.
And I think one of the things, you could bring the chart up too again on yours if you like, but I also think one of the big things is that, and I felt this for a while, I've always said this, and I've said this since the beginning, even I said here, it's not that he's a bad guy, it's just he's just not in his element, he's not in his dharma, and I think it would just be better for everyone if he would resign, frankly. He's just not in his place. He doesn't.
Well, I think that the universe is going to bring him to his own needs.
Let's see if it will, because again, this is the thing. You would think that he would have maybe even done it already, because he's already been cracking the entire time. Now the pressure's going to get turned up even more. And I was thinking when you were talking about how this Pluto Saturn brings someone to their knees, and it compels us to say, okay, and recognize, yes, I'm in over my head, or I'm not in my dharma, I'm not in my purpose, and I need to leave this thing. And if we don't do it, then it can kill us. Again, that's
the thing, is I think the health stuff is, especially with his brain or his heart, that's the thing that's really intensifying. And on March 5th, when Mercury goes retrograde, it will retrograde and meet up with the sun pretty much. Yeah, it'll be squaring his sun, and then it'll be squaring his moon. And Neptune is going to pass its shadow period, which in Western we call that, and I'm sure in Vedic, right after it passes the point in which it went retrograde the last time. So now Neptune's going past its shadow zone, and Mercury retrograde will meet up with Neptune this year in Pisces, which Mercury is debilitated horribly there. And they're going to be at 16 squaring his Uranus and his whole nodes and his moon, and then they're going to stop there and stay there, and then they come direct finally, and it's all going to be now exact. It's just like, and then that's going to be
a lot of what's going on. And while that's happening in his personal chart, like I said, we're going to be having Saturn K2 just tracking.
Yeah, and Saturn K2 will be starting their thing, and actually in Western during that Mercury retrograde will be Pluto and K2, so it'll be extremely felt, and with Mercury and Neptune, wherever you put it, it's going to be confusing. It's going to be really, and especially in Vedic, it'll be in Aquarius, that retrograde, and anything it's going to bring out just so many electric, weird situations, and it's going to be making squares to his Taurus stuff. It'll be.
So aside from him, I mean, he's definitely a catalyst, because he's.
And then Mars is heading towards all that stuff right after that in April and into, he's got Mars.
Aside from him, which I didn't even, like in my 2019 forecast that I didn't even really mention him about it. I've talked about how we're all going to, while this is happening socially and whatnot, we're all going to have to be looking at our responses to each other and our triggering and our polarization and our lack of understanding and inability to think clearly, because that's what we're doing. We're so triggered. I'm sure there are people that have been triggered monumentally because of some of the things we've been saying about Trump, when they're just simple observations, but they're people.
We're not even taking a side or anything right now. It's just
no. I mean, I don't even know. All I'm saying though is that people need to start examining things that are obvious and start thinking clearly and get out of this like worship, weird kind of, again,
worship from both sides, like it's kind
otherism that I talked about, which is so important between the Democrats, Republicans, Americans, Mexicans, Muslims, all of this siloing into different categories. This stuff is going to get this is going to be the big
extreme, because I want to show one more last chart here for the year about this Saturn Pluto thing. Is what I was talking about earlier was was this Jupiter Neptune square continues throughout the whole year, and this Saturn Pluto gets close, but at the very end I want to show you how we end the year in December. So on December 3rd, Jupiter comes into Capricorn in Western, and that's with Saturn and Pluto. And the South Node and K2, right, is going to be starting to get ready for Jupiter. But Jupiter's, of course, at fall, or it's at detriment. And so that was the last time, was 1284, was Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, which is the two biggest planets. And then you got Pluto, which is, of course, the farthest planet away. And you have a node in there. You have a nodal axis. The last time we had Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and a node all in Capricorn was 1284, but this time we have the trine to Uranus, thank God, which is more like the Renaissance 1517 period. So it feels like to me this will even be more intense than the Renaissance than ever, just because Jupiter is actually going to be here with that element that wasn't there before. And then, of course, we go into, at the end of the year, we're getting ready for Jupiter, Saturn, right? That's a big deal. And it's this also, this Neptune element of Jupiter will finish. And during the, I don't know if you, just because we were doing case studies, what was the day of the election? It was November 6th, I think, or 7th, 2016, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was the 6th.
Right. So if you look at it in Western on that day, it was the 8th. Yes, it was on a Tuesday. So if you look at it, we had this Saturn Neptune square that had been going on, and it got really intense during that buildup of the whole entire election. When we were having the battles between Hillary and him, it was just like. And with the stories that were coming out about her and him and all that stuff, Saturn was at 10 and Neptune was at 10 square. September 8th, that was all when all the crazy, weird stories were coming out. So, kind of crazy.
Great case studies, David. Thank you so much for sharing all this. This has been awesome. And I exceeded my expectations. I knew you were going to bring some stuff, but this is great, especially going all the way back to the Renaissance and showing how this recurrence, especially of it's literally, it's amazing to see that it's kind of the same buildup, but with Jupiter there, that happened in that, what was it, 1287 you said, which was the time when the Catholic Church, the authoritarian control was there, but now we have it with the Uranus trine.
We have it with the trine, 1284, and then now we have the trine,
So this leads to I think, and I hope, and I'm feeling like what's going to be going on a lot this year is, as we said before, looking at all of this stuff, not turning away from it, staying engaged, finding that collective that's beyond all of the labels, the D's and the R's and the Muslims and the Mexicans and all of this stuff, because we really need each other and we share everything, we share everything in common, and the ways that we disagree are small compared to the ways that we agree, and we need to be with each other and see these things, especially these political figures and all of these things that we're so kind of seduced by now. Start looking at this stuff with clarity. And again, this is the sort of cold reality of Saturn, to bring consequences, to bring things that wake us up and shake us into wakefulness. And
Yes.
so even though it's going to be a pretty intense year.
Yeah, because with Uranus entering Taurus, like it did in 1934, which brought into new alliances, shifts in power as well, just as far as, because Uranus rules people, the value of what alliances are renegotiated. It's kind of like the game Risk, you know, switching the board around. And we're going to see a lot of that coming up here for the next decade. And we're going to see it very intensely this year start to happen. So when people start to look at alliances as always being the same, there's no such thing. Uranus always comes around and switches the board of the chessboard up, you know? And that's where I think the weirdest part is. And we do have to watch out because Uranus and Taurus did bring up the Nazi Party. It did bring up fascism in Italy.
Absolutely. I mean, these are the possibilities right now. There's rise of despotism and dictatorships, and you know, again, not to get too political, but and I'm not saying Trump necessarily, but
there's a lot of stuff going on right now in Europe.
Turkey, Putin, and the guy in Brazil, I forgot his name, but there's hard right, far right, protectionist, nationalistic tendencies all around the world right now. And again, these are the things that we're all dealing with. But the other thing we have to also understand is, at least my feeling is, we see ourselves at a moment in time, but where I see things going is the whole youth culture is coming. Like even 2020 elections and whatnot, the young people, the biggest spasm and rupture that's happening right now is the people that have been in power, which are like the white people, the white men, the people that have had the power, are like, I don't want to lose it. I want to hang on to it. And that's, to me, that's what the big 2016 lesson was about. I'll just say this, just personal opinion, some people don't like, but I think as much as anything, there was a lot of misogyny in that, in the election of Trump in that regard, because Hillary was so descended upon with such vitriol. And I think there was quite a bit of misogyny in that, frankly, even though, you know,
there was a lot of, well, the South Node was conjunct, or K2 was conjunct Neptune on the day of the eclipse and during those last 2 months of the, and there was a lot of stuff behind the scenes on both sides.
No, of course on both sides.
You know, and it was like, and it was weird because in many ways, we might even find out later that they're like, because of their old friendship, there could even be this whole weird thing that we don't even know about.
Aside from all that, I'm not talking
each other. Take care of each other in a weird way. It's weird.
But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people when
in the world. I get what you mean.
That's a whole other thing. What I'm saying though is that when I'm talking about misogyny, I'm saying that it's like, especially like white people of privilege and power. Look at the world, the culture with the black shooting and all of this stuff is
coming out.
Everything is, the people that have had the power are resistant to let go of it. And this is what the world is dealing with now, I think, more than anything. And I think this rise of nationalism and white men in power and blah, blah. So when I said misogyny, I'm not talking about political intrigue and all, who knows what's going on with that. There's still people, there was still so much of this, people wanting to hold on to power and not let go of it. And that game is over. It is over. I think what's happening is the world is trying to hang on, that segment of the world is trying to hang on for squeeze the last bit of juice out of that lemon. And it's about to blow apart. So people need to say, okay, now what's the world look like in the aftermath of that? Because that's what the world is going to be. It's just how much pain are we all going to go through getting there? At least that's my feeling.
Well, yeah, because if you look in 2020, we have Jupiter, Saturn, which are coming towards their conjunction in Aquarius, which will be the first time Jupiter and Saturn in tropical astrology will have met in an air sign. They've been in earth signs for the last hundreds of years.
Right.
And Aquarius is this this youthful revelation. It's also interesting because I think it's 2020 November, and yeah, it's going to be Mars also retrograde, and it's going to be a way unique change.
So we'll have another hangout.
Identification.
So we'll have another conversation between now and then.
Yeah, we definitely have to, because it's gonna be 2020 is pretty crazy too, man. But I think that at the end of the day, it's just awesome to see between East, West, or any other astrology that, I think that today's conversation is proof of showing the world and how we all can get along, and we can all find the common denominator and find love and a consciousness and be great friends. And I think that's what you and I have formed in a great way.
Yeah, dude, it's been great to meet you, and to, when we met in person and in our correspondence, as I said, it's why I wanted to bring you on, David, because I also know you're a great researcher, and I think this was fantastic. I mean, you blow me away with transits, this kind of in-depth transit work, and there's a lot for people to ponder. And
yeah, it's been
to join your channel. I'm sorry?
I said it's been really fun to do, and that's what I think. I mean, as you being an astrologer and a teacher, like, I think as an astrologer, you can get really bored if it's just the same. Like, there's only, what's left is like research, like, and doing your own. It's like crazy,
Yeah, that's why I was actually literally just also not just wanting to have you on so that my viewers can see you, but so I could see what you come up with. I'm like, let me know, because I wanted to check out what you brought forth too as well. So Thank you. And people, sign up and go to the Leo King and join David's YouTube channel, and also give me a link. I'll put a link to your apps and websites and stuff as well.
Yeah, it's just on my website, theleoking.com.
Leoking.com. Awesome. Well, dude, it's great to have hung out with you, and we'll do this again soon, okay?
Yeah, brother. Good to see you, man. And Happy New Year. And Happy New Year to everyone, too.